Pretty chill. We don't try to be too formal around here. Welcome to another D3 Datacast. Looking forward to this one. We're going to have a special guest join us in a matter of moments as we bring Bob Quillman on for a segment we're calling Can We Say That, where we run through a number of topics. Maybe not so mid-season hot take, so to speak, but just, some things that maybe we've been thinking about, and we'll have to see if they're fair to say or not. But first, we're going to start off this week's episode as we do each and every week with a new 4-point play, running down the week that was, talking about the things that caught our eye or were on our minds as we watched Division III basketball over the preceding week. Matt, kick us off here in the North. What do you have?
Yeah, Zach, I know I talked about St. Vincent last week, but the PAC has still been on my mind ever since then. I want to talk about the conference again because I think it's getting spicy already in the early going here. This week, W&J took a loss to Bethany. Westminster beat St. Vincent. W&J then beat Geneva. Franciscan beat St. Vincent. We now have 4 teams at 3-1. That's Washington and Jefferson, Chatham, Westminster, and Geneva. Then 3 more teams at 2-2: Franciscan, St. Vincent, Allegheny. I know it's still really early in conference play, but this is a fascinating race to me here in the PAC. I've been checking in on the league whenever they have conference games on that particular date. I think it's going to be a fun one to watch down the stretch. Almost certainly, just a one bid league here in the PAC, but that doesn't mean that the conference race is second rate at all. I think it's going to be great. It's wide open. I don't think anyone's going to run away with it, so it's just going to be a really fun one to watch as we go week in and week out here in the PAC.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes those leagues that look like they're shaping up to be one bid leagues are even more exciting to watch, right? Because so much is on the line. You don't have that fallback of, oh, we can still get in as an at large. So interesting one to follow, and a lot of fun here in the early season portion of conference play when you see those races shape up where we've got just a bunch of teams in the mix. You don't necessarily see an early favorite emerging, at least in terms of how things look in the
Yeah.
standings. For the North play here, Matt, for me, I'm going to go with Kenyon, who got an 80-75 win at Worcester last Wednesday. And if you're like me, your first thought was, wow, when was the last time that happened? Well, it didn't take long in the game story from the Kenyon athletics department to answer that question. The win snapped a 63 game losing streak by Kenyon to Worcester that started nearly 30 years ago to the day. January 5th, 1996 was the first game in that streak. It ended January 7th, 2026. And Matt, not only that, but it gave the Owls their 8th win of the season. That sets a new high water mark going back to the 2015-2016 season when they won 11 games. So, not just an isolated bright spot for Kenyon. This is, kind of overall been a nice season for them.
Yeah, and that's probably cool for the players. That's something that hadn't happened in their lifetimes then, if that had been almost 30 years that they get to knock off Worcester there. So really cool for Kenyon to get that win.
Let's turn the compass to the east. What do you got there, Matt?
Yeah, Zach. Endicott just continues to roll. They've stretched their record out to 13-1 now. This week they had wins over Western, New England, and Hartford. Endicott was a team I liked coming into the season, but I don't think I liked them this much. They really fully hit my radar in week 2 when they beat Tufts. Since then, they've only lost one game. That's their only loss all season. It was a 4-point loss that they suffered on the road at Colby. That was back on November 22nd. They're sitting atop the CNE at 5-0. Roger Williams is close behind at 5-1. Suffolk there is at 4-1. Endicott has not played either of those teams yet, so still some difficult games to go. But they do have a win over Nichols. That's another perennial CNE contender there. But Endicott is a team that has now been hanging on the end of my top 25 ballot for much of the season. They're there again this week. Since that one loss to Colby that I mentioned, they've won almost all their games by double digits. They have an 8-point win over Salem State and a 9-point win over Hartford. Otherwise, it's been 10 points or more in all of their games. They're looking great. They haven't it hasn't always been the toughest schedule, but they're not really doing anything to disappoint. They've been winning their games by double digits, as I said. Endicott has looked great, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how their season finishes up. They're a team that certainly looks like they have a good shot at making the tournament and then could make a lot of noise if and when they get there.
Yeah, and already having a win over Tufts under their belt certainly shows that what they're capable of.
Mm-hmm.
Going to be a tough draw for someone, as it looks like they, in good shape to be a tournament team. So my play here in the East, Matt. Let's talk about over the last few years, we've really led the charge for the hashtag D3 Dunks
Yeah.
on Twitter, but trying to take a step back a little bit this year to make that a little bit more of a community effort. Thankfully, Lynchburg got the memo because they posted their own D3 Dunk tweet this week that caught my eye as a result. Shout out to Lynchburg assistant coach Brandon Vanover for tagging us and using the D3 Dunks hashtag on Twitter. The Hornets had a few dunks in their 95-59 win at Eastern Mennonite, but this fast break behind the back feed from Michael Gray to set up Jamarcus Brown for the throwdown was a thing of beauty in particular. And you can see it here. Take a look, courtesy of Flow Sports.
Other way in a hurry, fast break. Michael Gray leaves it for the slam dunk from Jamarcus Brown.
Yeah, Zach, awesome to see the highlights posted to social media with D3 Dunks. We will always boost the signal when we see those out there, so we will hit the retweet button. Especially if you tag us, we'll be sure to see it there. So awesome one from Lynchburg on that play.
Start looking south.
Yeah, Zach, let's talk about Emory. I think despite how good they've been for pretty much the entire season, I don't feel like they're a team that I've talked about in like a dedicated space on this show much this season. They're 11-1 overall, number 3 on my personal top 25 ballot. I think they've been collecting a lot of style points along the way, especially lately. The Eagles opened up UAA play this past weekend. They went on the road at Rochester and they won. The early part of their UAA schedule is a little bit on the softer side. There's not really any soft games in the UAA, but someone has to be in the bottom half. And, they played Rochester. Then next week they'll play Brandeis. They'll play NYU, Case Western Reserve, and Carnegie Mellon. That's the part of the schedule where they're going to have to get a lot of wins in order to kind of stay in that UAA race. They're one of the UAA favorites. After that, though, they're going to have back-to-back Chicago, then Wash U, then Chicago and Wash U, kind of in that calendar turn from January to February. So that'll be a really difficult stretch. To me, the UAA race is going to be maybe more about which teams can avoid losing games to the Case Western Reserves, the Carnegie Mellons, the Rochesters. Still good teams, but teams who are going to be in the back half of that league, at least it looks like. We know the Chicagos, the Wash U's, the Emorys are probably going to lose games to each other. But what are you going to do against those other portions of your schedule? Emory has that time right now in their schedule where they can get those wins. It will be interesting to see what they do. Can they hold serve, or are they going to maybe cede some wins to the other teams? But I think Emory's been great. I expect them to be right in the mix all the way throughout UAA play. That league is just so strong and so deep. All those games are tough, and you can't take any night off in the UAA.
It's a great point about the schedule. Really interesting with the way the UAA scheduling works. They make that snake turn after the first round through, and for Emory that sets up back-to-back Wash U Chicago weekends. With those 3 teams being the teams that we figure to be in the mix, I feel like that's going to be those 2 weeks are really going to be what sets up the UAA championship picture. But you still got the rest of that second round robin to go through. And like you said, and things can change in a hurry. Should someone lose to a team in the bottom half, which given the quality of that league, saying bottom half of the league doesn't mean what it means in a lot of other leagues, right?
It's still top 100, right? So it's still good.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, in the South, I'm sticking with the ODAC, and I made sure to confirm my campus geography when choosing ODAC topics for the East and South plays here on my compass this week. So let's head to Danville, Virginia, where Averett knocked off Randolph-Macon. The D3 Datacast computer liked Randolph-Macon by something like 16 points in this one, so it was certainly an upset, but not like a crazy upset. Some of the other ones we've seen earlier this season. However, it did take a crazy shot to pull off. Down by 2, the Cougars were running out of time, not only on the game clock, but the shot clock had to get kind of a heave up. And it may not have been the look they wanted, but it turned out to be the shot that they got, both just to get off and to get through the basket to turn that 2-point deficit to a 1-point lead. And they were able to survive the final seconds after that. Matt, you play a close game in conference play, crazy things can happen. And I think that's exactly what you can consider this final shot that turned out to be the game winner for Averett. Once again, courtesy of Flow Sports. Take a look at this.
Sellers looking to be the hero. Inside, working against Pulley. Back out to Bracey. Bracy holds on to it. 5 to work with. Bracy backpedals. Gets an on-ball screen. Bracy, gotta let it fly. Oh my goodness! Tamias Bracy with a miracle shot! Hayward has taken the lead!
Zach, you called that kind of a heave, and I think that's exactly what the shot was. It just was a prayer that went sent up, and it went through. Amazing shot, amazing win for Averett.
And it turns out that was just the start of a crazy week for Averett, as their game on Saturday hosting Virginia Wesleyan was suspended with a little under 10 minutes to play due to condensation causing a wet floor. And that game will be resumed at a later date. I don't know that that's actually been determined as of yet, but 9-something to play there with Averett up 47-43. Too bad to only be able to get about 75% of that game in, because it looked like it was going to be another terrific one.
Yeah.
All right, one more point on this week's compass. Matt, let's look west. What do you got?
Yeah, Loris jumping out to a 6-0 start in the American Rivers Conference has caught my eye. 2 really big wins, big number wins. They beat Central by 30 on the road, and then Buena Vista by 27 at home. Combine that with Nebraska Wesleyan losing to Dubuque. It means the Dewhawks are now momentarily alone in first place of the ARC. Their maybe biggest game of the season remaining is coming up this upcoming Saturday when they travel to play Nebraska Wesleyan. So they're who's 5-1 in the conference. This league's always tough. Home court advantage probably pays off big time in the conference tournament, with maybe 2 or 3 teams looking like really, I think at least 3, looking like really good contenders in that conference. Right now it's Loris who's on top. They're going to have that big game against Nebraska Wesleyan coming up this week. Fantastic depth to this league as always. So shouts to Loris for what they've been able to do so far this season.
Yeah, it seems like it kind of varies as to how many of those teams in that mix are ultimately going to be like NCAA tournament type teams. But regardless of whether it's, a single bid league, or as we've seen in recent past, a 4-bid league, the ARC race always is one of the best to watch. And then, anytime you have a conference race like that, you by definition have a really interesting conference tournament setting up. So fun to be able to get that kind of conference tournament on the heels of a great conference season. For my play in the West, man, let's talk about UW Platteville, because on last week's show, we talked about the tightest conference races, which we ranked the WIAC number 1. And in talking about all the races, if people remember the slides, we looked at the top 5 teams in each conference in terms of what, at the simulations at that point were showing for their odds to win the automatic qualifier. And that top 5 view last week, Matt, did not include UW Platteville. But after picking up wins this week over Eau Claire and La Crosse, Platteville not only moves into that top 5, but vaults all the way up to the league's automatic qualifier odds favorite in our simulations run from Sunday morning. That was probably a artificial cutoff line for what we probably could have anticipated was more of a 6-team race than a 5-team race, right? And so it just was that Platteville was kind of left off of that view. But look, in a conference like the WIAC, pick up a couple big wins, how much that can change the overall outlook.
Yeah, they were at like 8.4, whereas Whitewater maybe was like 8.6%, so they were just off. But yeah, we mentioned that was like the lowest overall odds. They're right now the favorite, but I think still 34% to win. So still the field is the favorite in the WIAC, as it'll probably be the rest of the way, right?
Yeah. A lot of really good, fairly even teams.
Yep. Great race.
Okay, so that's what we kind of had our eye on this past week. Heading into another week, we have another top 25 from D3Hoops.com. Matt, take us through your ballot for this week.
Yeah, so I think at the top, Trinity, Connecticut, they're holding serve. Maybe interesting thing, though, I did keep Randolph-Macon number 2, even despite their loss. I think for me, they had a little bit of a cushion in my mind between the next group, Emory, Mount Union, Chicago, which are really tightly packed. I think right now that just adds Randolph-Macon. Those 4 for me are basically tied. So don't really read too much into 2 versus 5 here. If you wanted to put Chicago 2, I think that's completely fine. I think this group is really, really tight for me. Probably a tier below Trinity, but then, they're next. The next grouping, Mary Washington, Claremont Mudscript, St. Thomas, Texas, maybe Redlands through Wash U. I think that's a solid 6 through 10. Those teams are all probably pretty even for me as well. And then 11 on, it's just really tight. There's teams I have, Tufts, if you didn't want to vote for Tufts, I don't think you have to, but I have them in as at number 11 right now. I think they're kind of, since their opening weekend bump, I think they've been really, really good. Gustavus Adolphus at 12. 12 maybe feels a little bit too high, but then Gustavus Adolphus has been really, really good. So they've been fantastic. Stevens Point at 13. UW Platteville, I think, comes all the way in after a great week into my top 25 at 14. But that's what I mean. Like, I don't think that there's a big gap between 35 and 15 or so right now. So a team to jump all the way in at 14 is not a big deal. And then my last, maybe 10 or 11, Calvin, Hood, Catholic, Illinois Wesleyan, Montclair State. Number 20 here is UW La Crosse. Then Christopher Newport, Trinity, Texas, UW Oshkosh, Hampton, Sydney, and Endicott. That's kind of how my top 25 is rounding out this week.
Yeah, the big one to talk about there is that decision at the top. Of course, I don't think you've ever wanted to be a, win to move up, lose to, and you fall down type of voter, right? So Randolph Macon there. I think, earlier in the season, the talk was, yeah, Trinity seems like a fairly easy number one, but is Randolph Macon maybe closing that gap, right? So I don't know if you had previously thought of, not that you never wavered on Trinity, so that was kind of the tier at the top, and then maybe Randolph Macon was a tier by themselves,
Yeah,
and then you
kind of.
talked about how coming out of the week now maybe Randolph Macon's still at number two, but maybe more part of that tier group from 2 to 5.
Yeah. And for that specific Averett game, right? That's a road loss on a miracle shot to a pretty good team in your conference, right? Averett's not terrible. They're like a top 100 team, maybe top 75 type team. So they're pretty good. But you look at most of these other teams, they have losses as well, right? Maybe not to an unranked team or whatever, but Emory lost really big to Trinity, Texas. And we've seen Chicago, they lost a game. Yeah, that was a road game at Illinois Wesleyan, so that's not bad. But I think that just brings Randolph Macon to me kind of in that tier. They also have other impressive wins on their resume as well, and wins by big margins too. So, but yeah, I think you're right. I think before coming into this week, it was tier 1 Trinity, tier 2 Randolph Macon, and then starting the field. Now that start of the field includes Randolph Macon as well.
Mm-hmm. Now, what about, kind of figuring out the order of how you're going to vote for UW teams? You got 4 in this week? Do you kind of try to, order that conference by itself and then figure out how you're going to slot them in? What's the process there is when you're dealing with 4 teams from the same conference? Not to mention probably, at least 1 or 2 more that you're kind of considering, right? I think Eau Claire has been one, and they move out, and who else am I missing here?
Whitewater was
Yeah.
close a few weeks back, but then they haven't been quite on the same level. I think when you have 4 teams in the same conference, you want to kind of get that order right. I didn't do them separately and then slot them in though, but once they were all in there, I did want to make sure I got the UWs right. Stevens Point for me right now is the top of that, but it's you see them back to back, so really close with Platteville. I did keep La Crosse above Oshkosh, even though Oshkosh won the head-to-head this week. That was an overtime game at UW Oshkosh, so I didn't feel like that one had to necessarily drop them or hit them above. But as I've been saying all along, like 20 to 23 on my ballot, that's basically even. You can even go up to 13 to 23 and say that's really close. What I'm saying by having 4 WIACs in here is there's 4, at least, right? At least 4 really good teams, and they're all probably still pretty even.
All right, we can expect the final poll to be released sometime, generally early evening, if not late afternoon on Monday. So looking forward to see how your ballot gets mixed in with the other 24 to produce the 25 that we get for this week. And kind of a fun time of year. I think from here on out, we can count on weekly top 25 polls, right? At the beginning of the season, sometimes it's a little bit of a delay as we're trying to, get some more information before putting out a new one. Then we have scheduling things with the holidays and, breaks and games played, stuff like that. So there can be a little bit of a start and stop feel to the release of top 25 polls, kind of in that first half of the season. But, here on out, it's going to be a weekly exercise.
Yeah.
All right, let's move into our main topic of the episode here. We're gonna bring on our friend Bob Quillman for a segment we're gonna call "Can We Say That?"
We'll be back in a second.
We're pleased to welcome in a special guest to this week's show. For this segment, we're going to call "Can We Say That?" Joining the program now, Bob Quillman, host of the QCast, top 25 voter, and as Matt likes to say, general man about town. Welcome to the program, Bob. Thanks for being here.
It's an honor to be on the Datacast. It's like a QCast Datacast crossover episode. I used to like those, like in the '80s sitcoms when they would do that. You know, like Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. They'd be on each other's shows. I think it's like that. This is awesome.
I mean, Matt and I are more of like the Full House Family Matters
You're a little
crossover,
later.
but we're
Yeah,
significantly younger than you, obviously. So,
correct.
um, yeah. So as we said, we're gonna call this segment "Can We Say That?" Right. So we've got a range of topics here that we're gonna start off with, being in the form of a "Can we say that?" Um, prompt, right? So let's start off with kind of an easy one. Can we say that this is the best time of the regular season?
Am I first? Am I up first on
You're
these?
first. Yeah, you can go. You're the guest.
That is a softball. I think absolutely. I think the heart of the season here, like conference season, Wednesdays, Saturdays, whatever nights or days your team plays, because this time of year everybody's in it. As I think of the CCIW, literally all 9 teams right now are in the race. And when we get later in the year, like we could say the tournament's the best time of year, but a whole bunch of teams are gone. So to me, this is the best time of the year right here.
Yeah, Zach, there's something for me about looking at the schedule during conference play. And for us as Calvin, I see like Albion and Adrian and Alma on the schedule, and I can just smell the popcorn and hear the bouncing of the ball. I can feel myself in the arena for some reason for conference play, looking at the schedule more viscerally than I can for non-conference play.
Yeah, it seems to really settle into that schedule, Bob. You alluded to it that for the teams that we both follow closely, it's you got a Wednesday game, you got a Saturday game, right? And then I think as just general Division III basketball fans, it's fun coming up here because we got our first UAA weekend where it's really the Friday Sunday, right? Instead of the weekend we're coming off where it's just the travel partners, the single game. So you kind of know what to expect on that weekly rhythm. Whereas, there's a lot of intrigue and a lot of fun about non-conference play, but it's like, sometimes my team's playing Friday, Saturday. Sometimes my team's only playing Tuesday, right? So it's a little bit harder to keep tabs on what's going on. Once you get in that conference, MIAA, CCIW, they're playing Wednesday night, they're playing Saturday. Sometimes you get the Friday, Sunday with the NESCACs as well as the UAAs, and you get some of those, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, maybe in the NACC, something like that. So I think
Right.
I think it's fair to say it is the best time of year. And like you said, this time, particularly here in kind of early to mid January, everyone is still in it. You might have an idea, or there might be some teams that are off to better starts, depending on how many conference games have been played. But really, it's going to be all about playing out those games, right? There's a reason they play them.
And the rivalries too. I'm thinking
Oh yeah,
the non-conference games are fun. Like the Yeshiva game was a lot of fun, but we play at Wheaton on Saturday, and like there's a history there. Like I can list you 10 crazy things that have happened at Wheaton, and so like there's rivalries, Augustana and Milliken. So I just think that's another component to this time of year.
well, we'll be hoping that there aren't any leaky roofs this time around.
Me too.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our next one here. Can we say that our outlook on the UAA race is no different at the start of conference play than it was coming into the season?
Well, it depends who we is, because I know a lot of people that thought that Wash U, having lost their 2 best players, was the favorite. I have some good friends that voted them like number 2 in the preseason. Now, if we is me, I looked at it like Emory and Chicago were 1 and 2. In fact, I think I had Emory 1 because I picked him in our conference draft. Emory 1, Chicago 2. Only difference for me is I've got Chicago 1, Emory 2 in like a 1A, 1B. So I'm kind of right where I was. I'm not saying, by the way, WashU is not in that race. I'm just saying that to me on paper, Emory, Chicago are a tier above like whoever's next, which I think is WashU.
For me, coming into the season, I was one of those people that had WashU pretty high. Chicago, I think, pretty close, and Emory, I forget the order right now, but maybe it was Emory, WashU, then Chicago. I think that's still about right. For me, Emory and Chicago, I think, look like they're maybe a step above WashU, but you're right, we're only 1 game in, so WashU's not out of that race. But I think the general maybe tier list of the UAA is pretty similar. I think those 3 look like they're at the top. NYU, we're still kind of trying to figure out exactly maybe what they're going to be. And then what Carnegie Mellon, Rochester can make some noise, but I think there may be a step down. So I think to me, it's still pretty close to what we thought going into the preseason there.
And it depends on, who you are, your personal opinion coming into the season and how you might feel now. But to me, I feel like it was, a 3-team race. I think it can still be a 3-team
Sure.
race. I think the margin was a little bit surprising in that WashU Chicago game, but that was the game at Chicago. That was going to be really important for Chicago
Yeah.
to get that one, having to play the return game in St. Louis. But it's just kind of interesting because I think, that was the outlook heading into the season. We went through all of non-conference play, and I think all it did was mostly confirm what we thought heading in. And now we're here at the doorstep of, or one step into the door here in UAA play, and it's probably about the same team mix. And maybe it just depends on what your priors were on WashU and whether or not you have any reason to change off of
Yeah,
those.
I
I think
think that
I think
those right.
Chicago, Chicago has proven themselves. Emory, I think you should feel really good about. It's just a matter of where you maybe came into the season thinking about WashU and how much, especially that margin in that game against Chicago, kind of plays into how you think about the race going forward.
Agree. And those margins, like Matt said, I mean, it doesn't really matter whether it was a 25-point margin or 7. It is what it is. WashU lost a tough road game. On paper, you were expecting WashU to lose that thing. Emory went on the road and won at Rochester. That's really kind of quietly the bigger one, I think, that happened that day. And so, yeah, those 3 teams, very much contenders.
All right, let's go closer to home here for you, Bob, at least in terms of your fandom, if not your actual residency. Can we say that the CCIW overschedules to some degree?
Now, I think you're saying, like, do some of the teams play too many tough games when they don't necessarily need to?
Yeah, I think that's the idea there. Yeah.
It's funny. I was thinking of something similar to that today. I was trying to figure out within the CCIW how many of the teams you can beat and get the quality win bonus or whatever it's called that you get at 53 or better. I think it's 7 of the 9 teams. So that's pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I think it depends on what people are chasing. I think that generally the CCIW teams like to play good schedules to get ready for the conference. I also think people have not yet adjusted to the MPI world that we're in. I think people are sort of still scheduling for RROs and SOS and all of that stuff. And if people did take a step back, like Carthage right now, if Carthage had not played those GLI games and just had played 2 teams they could have driven to, right now their situation in terms of the top 25 poll and things would be a whole lot better. And so I think you're onto something. But again, I think those great games that like Carthage played are probably the reason they're playing so well now. They were forced to figure some stuff out. So I'm going to say the answer to this long answer is no, that everyone's got a rhyme or reason to why they're scheduling those.
Here's maybe the counterpoint to that. The CCIW is a great league. Like you said, 7 of your 9 or whatever are getting you the quality win bonus. I think that's a conference where you get just about enough quality in league that you don't need to chase too hard. I think the difference to me right now between the CCIW and the WIAC, you get there, or at least coming into maybe conference play, their top 5 or 6 teams are all sitting there at like 11-0, 10-1, 8-2 kind of a thing. It feels like the CCIW teams have taken that 3rd or 4th loss more frequently. And when you look at how the rest of the season might play out, the WIAC could get 4 or 5 teams into the tournament. The CCIW might only get 2 teams into the tournament.
Yeah.
That might not all be scheduling, but I think some of it might be. And I think you're right. If we're still kind of chasing those Region 8 and 9 regionally ranked wins, maybe the CCIW doesn't need those quite as much as some of the other leagues. Like the Midwest Conference might need to chase some of those games to get those quality win bonuses now. So it's probably not too much, but maybe they could look at tuning it down slightly. I don't know.
All right, so the CCIW is a great league, has great depth. But we've talked about this over the last couple of years. It feels like there isn't that premier team or 2 at the top that you just know is going to be like a second weekend type team easily. I think Illinois Wesleyan's been the closest thing to that over the last couple of years, but there really hasn't been that second team, right? And there was a lot of talk about Carthage and whatever their potential in that may be. It didn't really come to fruition last year. It's been very uneven in that regard this year. So I feel like the scheduling is not necessarily the problem. It's still that the CCIW doesn't have maybe the elite like multiple top 50 type teams, but it's still just very deep from that maybe like 50 to 100 or that, top 150 type of thing. I think the dynamic changes
Yeah.
if, if you do have that second elite team or have two elite teams, suddenly, you're playing the same schedule, maybe winning more games. And then I don't think maybe you're asking the same question.
Well, I think that the dynamic that's changed that the league still hasn't kind of recovered from is, remember, Gray Giovanni, for at least the last 10 or 12 or 15 years of his career, had Augustana as the best program in the league. So
Yeah.
Illinois Wesleyan, which made Final Fours during that span and won league titles, was number two. So Augie and Illinois Wesleyan, Todd Raridan at North Central, had a powerhouse at North Central. So there's three, and John Baines at Elmhurst. So now you put the usuals in there. And how about Wheaton? How Wheaton was. You had years in the CCIW where there were four top 25 type teams. The league hasn't yet bounced back from Augustana not being where they were, North Central not being where they were. So now you're left with Illinois Wesleyan year in and year out as a top 25 ish team. And then whoever is second kind of rotates.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the league is at this point. I do think that Carthage is here to stay. I think Elmhurst, I think Wheaton will be back, but that's what's happened.
And that's the difference between being maybe the number 4 or 5 conference in the country and being like 1 or 2, I think, is that second or third, like no doubt top 25 team. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then I think you're having a different discussion again about the schedule, right? You played the same schedule,
Sure.
you have better teams, you're winning more games. Suddenly you're not. So if there is if there is agreement that maybe the CCIW as a whole is somehow overscheduling, it's really about maybe the overall strength in that top, 2, 3, 4, whatever,
Yeah.
not being at that level that we had seen in in the eras that Bob mentioned. Okay, let's move on to another conference here. Can we say that the ODAC has been disappointing this season? This is one of the real power conferences over the last several years. Can we say that maybe this season's been a little bit of a disappointment?
I would say we don't have the depth at the top. The ODAC has a million teams, right? So like we're used to seeing at the top there being like 5 teams that are top 25 contenders. And we don't really have that this year. We have one clear one in Randolph-Macon. And then we have Hampton, Sydney, and Roanoke that to me are kind of hovering near the bottom of my top 25 ballot. Then after that, there's no one that's clearly in the mix. So I would say it's not as deep at the top. And if your word is disappointing, Zach, I can go with that and say, sure, yes.
Is there another word maybe that you would?
I think no, we can't say it. If they're disappointing, it's only because they were so good the last few years, right? They set a huge bar. They had multiple Final Four teams one year. Randolph-Macon is still really good. I think Bob's right. There's 2 other teams there that are kind of top 25-ish, whether or not you want to put them in or not. We wouldn't be surprised if a Hampton, Sydney, or Roanoke made the second weekend of the tournament this year. There's still other, like Guilford's still pretty good despite a coaching change. Washington Lee has won some games. There's still a bunch of other good programs. And yeah, there's a million ODAC teams, but I think there's still like a top 6 or so conference in the country, probably right around there. And if you're disappointed, it's just because they set such a high bar. I think the ODAC is still great. Maybe not quite the level they were, but I don't think disappointing at all.
Well, that's why I was challenging the word disappointing, because again, we're comparing it to where it's been the last several years, and that was a league where during the COVID extra year, a lot of those programs were leveraging that extra year and had some old teams and some good teams and some powerhouses. So yeah, it's disappointing if we're comparing it to the last 2-3 years. I would just say it's a really good league. It's Massey League, 7 or 8 now. It's not Massey League number 1 or 2. So in that regard, it's probably down from where it was ranked in Massey the last few years.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk NJAC. Can we say that the NJAC getting 3 to 4 bids to the tournament was an anomaly, and this year's more what should be typical, where Montclair looks like they would be in great shape, and depending on what happens, especially whether or not Montclair wins the conference tournament, maybe a second team, maybe is that more what should be typical than what we've seen in the past with the NJAC getting 3 to 4 bids to the tournament.
I would say that four would be an anomaly. That the average year would be probably a one pool C team, so a two bid league. It's a strong league. It's a deep league. In some ways, it's like it's in a completely bizarro world. It's like the Arc, where it's just a deep league where everyone's good. Everyone's good. Sometimes no one jumps out from everyone else. Sometimes they do. Sometimes Nebraska Wesleyan is Montclair State this year.
Yeah.
I would say that somewhere in the middle is the reality for the NJAC, which 30 years ago was a powerhouse league, and now I think it's just a really, really good league with a bunch of good teams.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Bob basically on every point there. I think the NJAC is probably typically correctly a two-bid league. When we saw 3 and 4, maybe they were overplaying themselves a little bit. I think the comparison to the American Rivers Conference is great. I think some of those leagues, there was a bunch of good teams, maybe didn't always play the best schedules, but won a bunch of games out of conference and got themselves in position to be kind of that 3 or 4 bid league. Maybe it was I think maybe one year we did get like 4 NJACs and 4 American Rivers. Maybe that lined up in about the same year. So I think that's kind of, quote, too many for that type of league. But there are a bunch of good teams. We've seen a mix of those teams make deep tournament runs too. So I think they're good programs. It's not just a fluke. But I think typically, the quality of the MJAC is maybe more like a 9th or 10th overall conference where you're probably only getting 2 bids. I think that's about right. I think we should come to expect year in and year out maybe 3 or more from the NJAC.
Yeah, that's part of the discussion. With the two of you being top 25 voters, you should have kind of a calibration for, where teams kind of stack up, what a tournament team looks like. And it seems like whether we're talking about the old regional ranking system or the first year under NPI, for whatever reason, we've seen dynamics play out where the NJAC maybe is getting an extra team or two than you would feel like they deserve, just when you talk about, I don't want to say eye test, but just how you think of maybe a comparable team in another conference.
Yep.
Agree.
All right. Let's talk about John Carroll. They moved from the OAC to the NCAC. Can we say that John Carroll's move has hurt the OAC more than it has helped the NCAC?
That's a deep question right there. So let me talk through this. John Carroll's departure has hurt the OAC a bunch, in my opinion, because as I look at where the OAC is, you think of the OAC as one of the top 5 leagues in the country historically, last 20, 30 years. But with John Carroll gone and Marietta with a coaching change, like, what is the OAC right now? It's Mount Union. Sold. And then after Mount Union, like, are we putting all our chips that Muskingum is a national power? They were in the top 25 discussion here recently, still are. Marietta, where are they right now? After the coaching change, who are they going to be? The flip side of your question is, like, would the NCAC still have been a good league now without John Carroll? I think so. I think the NCAC, which used to be Wittenberg and Worcester for 25 years, now actually, even if you took John Carroll out and you said we've got Wabash and DePaul and Denison, like sold, and then you could talk about Ohio Wesleyan and Wittenberg and Worcester, and whoever else emerges. Like, that league is kind of, I mentioned the Arc. Maybe the NCAC is now that league that just, like, everyone's really good, or at least the top 6 are. So I think I'm answering your question I think the answer is yes. I think you're right in how you phrased that.
Yeah, on the OAC side, it might be that part of it is we're maybe just not used to Muskingum being that good, right? Otterbein, I think, is also really pretty good this year. I think they're in the mix. I think they could be maybe a at-large bid team. But other than that, it is Mount Union. It could just be that the rest of the OAC's in a little bit of a lull. Like, Capital's been kind of down for several years now. They used to be really good. Heidelberg also has that coaching change after a good year last year. They're a step back. So it could be maybe just that dynamic there. But I think you're right about the OAC. I think it's more about, Wabash has been good for a number of years now. Denison and DePaul have gotten a lot better the last few years. That adds to, Wittenberg, still kind of hanging on there. Worcester's down a little bit, but still the rest of that NCAC, as you already mentioned, they've all been really good. So I think that league's rise has been about more of those other teams taking a step forward than just John Carroll adding to the mix. They kind of more fit in with those teams now, rather than, I kind of pictured that they might kind of sit atop that league, but that hasn't been the case because they've all been so good.
Yeah, they've very much been a team that fits into a mix with other teams, as Bob mentioned, that if you could take John Carroll out of that, and it would still be a very compelling conference race to follow with a number of teams that look very even. Whereas on the OAC side, it seems to have really left a power vacuum that you used to be able to count on a couple teams at the top, and right now it looks, even to give an Otterbein or a Muskingum credit, very much looks like a Mount Union at the top. What's interesting though is this is the 1 year view, so it's going to be interesting to see as we get into year 2, year 3, year 4, post John Carroll move, to see how that looks. Because maybe it's just kind of overreacting. Maybe there's a group of teams in that NCAC mix that aren't going to have the staying power, and we'll have to see. Of course, John Carroll's not very many years removed from bringing in a bunch of transfers off a team that didn't win very many games, right? So there's a lot at play here. Might be wise to just kind of wait to see how this one plays out overall. But I think for this year in particular, definitely seems like that's been more problematic for the OAC than what it's really gained on the NCAC side. Let's talk a little Region 10. Can we say this is the best Region 10 has ever been?
I would say not so fast, my friend, probably on that one. I think we've had years in the past where there have been, like when Whitman and Whitworth were rolling, and they were top 10 teams all the time, top 15 teams, top 5 teams. When they were rolling, I think there was always a good SCIAC team or two. And then I think there was a UT Dallas, like a Texas team. So I would have to really start researching it. But yes, it's good that the Region 10 is very good this year, because you're referring to CMS and Redlands and the Texas teams, right? And all that. Like, yes, but I think there's been really good Region 10 years before, is what I would say.
I think ever's a long time. But when I looked at my simulations this morning,
not for actual Region 10, right?
Well, that's true for actual Region 10. But those groups of teams. So this morning's simulations runs, St. Thomas, Texas, and Claremont Mudscripts both end up as likely top 8 teams, and Trinity, Texas, and Redlands both.
Trinity is not a Region 10 team, Matt.
Okay, well, a Texas
6,
team.
right?
Okay, so they're Region 6. It's the same group of teams. Okay, I don't know if those Whitworth and Whitman teams were actually Region 10 back then either, so we'll call it a wash.
Well, that's true.
But those teams were also in the top 16. It's going to be, this is an aside, it's going to be really interesting to see if those teams end up that way. How do they bracket that mess, and with all the flights? Are we going to get like a Region 10 pot of death or something? I could see the committee having to do something like that. But I don't think we've had good teams, but this many kind of deserving host type teams. I think we could have 4 legitimate teams that you could construct a pot around if geography were to work. I bet they're going to have to fly some of those teams out to make things happen. But there's teams that put themselves in really good position. St. Thomas's resume is starting to stack up. Claremont Mudscripts, I think, is still undefeated. So maybe it's not the purely best teams that we've seen out of Region 10, but I think as a region, at least at the top, I think it's stacking up to put themselves in really great position for tournament seeding.
And I think Eric Bridgeland is always in the middle of this, right? Because there was a stretch there where he had Puget Sound at the top of the country, and then he had Whitman at the top, and now he's got Redlands. So he's been in the middle of this. We might need to get him on this podcast to settle that. But I would say, for now, I'm saying not so fast, my friend, on that one.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you a little bit more, Bob. As Matt and I were coordinating on this one earlier today, the thing that came to mind to me was that I feel like the Northwest Conference is as far off my radar as it's been in a long time. I
agree.
Certainly Whitworth is there and is in that mix of good teams, whatever you want to define that is. But other than that, like I just don't find myself being compelled to check the NWC scoreboard on D3hoops.com very often. And even as Matt highlights, Claremont Mud Scripts and Redlands in the Skyak, I think we've seen much more compelling Skyak races where, you're talking maybe about 4 or 5 different teams. But I guess it's just a matter of what you're really looking for. Can't argue with, maybe the projections of, how those teams are fitting in the top end of a potential tournament picture. But I just feel like for my attention, for my interest and intrigue, it's not quite there as maybe it's been in years past.
The power of a coach too, right? If Eric Bridgeland was still at Whitman and they were a top 5 team all the time, then we'd be like, okay, Whitworth is pretty good, and we got Whitman, they're ranked number 3. It just, yeah, it's like Gray Giovanni at Augustana. We talked about that. It's similar to that. I just think the NWC is I don't know if down's the right word, but there's no one that's jumping out, and it used to be that there were 2 teams that were always jumping out.
Can we say the national title race is already just Trinity, Connecticut versus the field?
I would say no. I would say absolutely no. So a few things. Just first, remember last year that Trinity played 2 really close games in Fort Wayne. The game against Wesleyan was close, 4 points, and NYU was up 4 with 1:20 to play, and Henry Vetter comes down and hits that long 3 to win it. So that's a big reason of why we're saying that, is because they have the hardware in their trophy case and they're undefeated. If maybe they had lost to Wesleyan and they had this current record, and we'd look at their strength of schedule and say it's, Massey says it's number 220, we'd be talking about them maybe like we talk about some of the other NESCACs on occasion. We nitpick their SOS, rightly so. I think Trinity, when I look at them, with the team I saw in Fort Wayne, if they played Chicago or Emory tomorrow or Mount Union, I don't know. I think that might be like the spread might be 2 or 3. So I'm going to say that that's a no, and that the gap between Trinity clearly is the number 1, but the gap between Trinity and the next pod, I don't think is huge at all. That's my opinion.
I think yes, we can say this. And I think, to me, all season long, the gap has been huge between Trinity and everyone else. Now, that gap might be closing. I think a question is, to start the year, why was Trinity overwhelmingly my number 1? Yet they were great. They were in the Final Four. They won the national championship, right? I think Bob's right to point out that they play that NYU game 10 times. It's probably like 6-4, and maybe NYU has the 6. Who knows, right? But they returned a bunch. They played like they were returning a bunch. But now the question throughout the year is, are they getting better like everyone else probably is as well? Or were they kind of at a ceiling? I don't know the answer to that. To me, Trinity's still far and away number 1. But it could be that when we get to the 8 teams this year in Fort Wayne, maybe there's an Emory there or a Chicago there. And at that point in the season, they might all be pretty close. But for me right now, I think Trinity is still a really big favorite. There's a huge gap. Maybe not necessarily talent-wise, but at least like resume-wise between Trinity and everyone else. I think everyone else has a lot to prove to come up to that. So I'm willing to say yes. It's Trinity, and then it's everyone else. Maybe when we get to February, I'll think it's different, but for right now, I'm willing to stay that way.
The one thing I'll say is that the reason I think the gap is closing is because, remember, Trinity came in as a complete team that was locked and loaded, ready to go.
Yep.
Most of these other teams that we're talking about were figuring out a whole, like, let's take Chicago. How do we play with Nick Roper and Shane Reagan? Like, what does that look like? Illinois Wesleyan, like, all these dudes are gone, and now we have Kason Lawrence and Noah Cleveland and this whole new, like, dynamic. Trinity would not have lost to Wisconsin Stout at home, right? So, but right now at this moment, if Illinois Wesleyan and Trinity played, I think that'd be like a really good game with how like Illinois Wesleyan's playing. If Wash U or Chicago or Emory, Randolph-Macon, Mount Union, if they played Trinity now, I think that'd be like a really good game. So I think as teams become who they are, teams that weren't fully baked, the gap closes. And I believe that's where it is. That said, Trinity is for sure the number 1. They are playing great, and it's like their defense alone that has them number 1. They're elite.
To some extent, I feel like, you think about a national champion, you got to make that run through the tournament, right? And there's some teams out there that I think are really good, but I'm not sure that I have the level of trust that game in, game out, they're going to be what they need to be on that particular day. Like Trinity just seems to be very, very consistent. And, to make those, uh, that path through those 5 games to get to a championship game. Like I feel like I just have a trust factor with them to get there that maybe with some other teams, yeah, they're really good at their best, where you just maybe don't see it quite as consistently as you do with Trinity. And let's not forget it. It's not like that championship. Yes, that championship game could have gone either way, but that this is a group that they were in Fort Wayne 2 years in a row. They were a
Right.
semifinalist. They got it done last year. They came back. They don't seem to be suffering any sort of hangover or disinterest in coming back off of that championship. So I feel like I agree with you. I think that there would be a lot of really good games for them out there, but I think for me, to be able to actually make that trek through a tournament, I think they got to be one of the teams that you trust to show up like they need to, um, probably more than anyone else out there.
And the tough thing is, I don't think this is a great year in the NESCAC for us to see great tests all the time.
Right.
Like Tufts is really good. I don't know that Tufts is great. And then the rest of the NESCAC, like I'm still trying to figure it out. Like Williams and Amherst and Middlebury, and so I don't know that we're going to finish the regular season and have seen Trinity play like if they had played in the WIAC. The WIAC, we would be like, okay, they probably would take a loss here or there. We'd be like, oh, it was a great game. I don't know that we're going to see that. So I would look, they're a great team. They're the favorite to win the national championship. I just don't see the gap. I didn't see the gap last year being huge, and I don't see the gap this year being huge as teams get to like mid-January here.
Yep, fair. Okay, so let's talk about the field a little bit. Can we say that, let's say, number 10 through 100 is as wide open as it's ever been, right? So consider like 15 spots in the top 25 and then 75 spots maybe after that.
I would say I would say 10 to 100 is a little extreme. And again, I go back to what I said about teams that are figuring it out. I think there's some really good teams like Chicago that are a lot better right now than they were on November 6th or whenever the first day was. Um, I think 100's too low to go there. Like I don't know who a 100 team is. Is that like Marietta? Are they 100? I'm trying to think who a 100 team would be, but I think 10 down to 30, I could live with that. But I do think there's a pretty good gap. Now I'm not saying there's not been crazy results and like anyone can beat anyone. That has happened this year to a huge degree. But right now, where teams are starting to become, I think 10 to 100 is too extreme.
That'd be like a Trine or a Chapman or a North Park.
Well, North Park has played. They beat Stevens Point, right?
Yeah.
North Park beat Stevens Point and played Eau Claire tough. Um, yeah, so I mean, we could probably find some good examples of this if we really
Yeah.
dug in. Yeah,
But maybe that
I mean,
number is 75 or 8. Like I think we talk about parity in men's basketball a lot for a number of years, but I think that's taken different forms. I think 2 years ago, maybe the year Trine won the national championship, I feel like all year long we were saying there's 16 or 20 teams that feel like they're right in the same mix for the national championship. So it was a top heavy parity. I think this year it really feels like if you stacked up like I don't know who's like a number 10 type team in the country. I know we've been talking about like
Redlands maybe.
yeah, like a Redlands or a Claremont Mudscripts or an Illinois Wesleyan or a Calvin, someone in that range, right? And you stack them up against someone who's maybe number 50. That might be like a UW Whitewater. Like that could be a good game. That could be a close game.
Absolutely.
I think so.
Yeah.
To me, once we kind of talked about the teams at the top of the top 25, maybe a little bit earlier. Some of those UAA schools like the Emorys and the Chicagos and Trinity, Randolph, Macon, that group. Once you get past that group, there's a big list of teams. I think that you played a neutral court game, and it's probably going to be a possession or two, and you're going to see weird results. And I to me, it stands out this year. Maybe it's just because we're living in this year right now, but it seems like that's the case maybe more than ever, that number 15 or 20 would play a really close game with number 80. I don't know.
I can buy that.
Well, how does it feel as top 25 voters, right? I mean, a top 25 ultimately doesn't really mean anything. There's nothing magic about the number 25. It's just familiar and accessible to fans, that just kind of watch college athletics overall, whether you're talking about college football, college basketball, whatever. But it creates an arbitrary line. So I I think in what we're seeing right here, there's not really any difference between those last 5 or 10 spots that are inside the top 25, and then maybe another group of 5, 10, 20 teams that you could consider that are outside the top 25. Just how highlighting how arbitrary of a line that in and out of the top 25 is.
Oh, I agree with that 100%. It's like the end of my ballot where I've got like Endicott in there and Hampton Sydney, and I'm getting Carthage back in now. Like I'm ready to say, okay, they have it figured out. I like Carthage, but Carthage right now probably to everyone else is probably number 45 or 50 or something like that. So that's what I'm doing right now. As I'm for my spots 24 and 25, I'm probably reaching down to what people would look at as the top 50 to do that. So yeah, it's 100%.
I think in a lot of years when I look at other people's ballots that they post on social media, maybe Monday morning, and I see a team maybe they have at 14 or 15 that I'm not voting, I start thinking like they're crazy or I'm crazy. This year, I just kind of say like, okay, I can see that. And it's not where I came down, but I think there's also 15 or 20 teams after I stop ranking that I'm not going to make any argument if someone says that that's a top 25 team.
Right.
So I don't know if I've just mellowed this year compared to previous years, but I feel less argumentative towards other people who take a different perspective, just because I think that there's a whole boatload of teams you can vote for right now, and they seem very even, right?
Agree.
Last one here for our Can We Say segment. Can we say that Division III basketball is in a good place despite the turmoil and uncertainty with high major college athletics and the NCAA as a general body?
I would think that dumpster fire that is Division One right now is helping Division Three more than anything I've ever seen in my Division Three years, because I actually am seeing people say it out loud. Like with all this stuff with NIL and with the transfer portal, I'm actually like seeing people say like, well, look at Division Three. Look at the football playoffs they just had. Like, wasn't that awesome? And maybe they'll point to basketball or something. I think Division Three is in a great place. I'm not saying Division Three doesn't have a host of things to work through. I think financial issues at institutions is the big one, figuring out revenue streams and all of that stuff. But just in terms of the pure experience, I think Division One being something the average fan is starting to say like, ugh, this is not what college sports was meant to be. Then they look at Division Three and say that's actually what it's meant to be. I think Division Three isn't just a place it hasn't been in a long time in the public eye.
Yeah, I think for me the transfer portal is a really is a big issue in Division One. Not that I mind students transferring and finding the right fit for them, but it's I don't know who's on the teams anymore, and you can't take a freshman at a high level Division One and let them develop. I don't know that that happens at a high level program anymore. In Division Three, for the most part, it does. It's the players that came 4 years ago that maybe played a developmental year or were on the end of the bench that have now worked their way to be starters. And you kind of see the trajectory of programs. I think for me as a fan, that's fun to follow. I see guys on our local team and they're here for 3 or 4 years. And yeah, there's some transfers in Division III as well, but usually it's about a kid either trying to play one more year or finding an academic fit or something like that. They lost a year to injury. It's not just about teams for the most part, right? Reloading on the next wave of transfers. And I think that's the thing I miss most about Division One sports, which I, for the most part, don't follow anymore. A lot of it is my time commitment to Division Three, but like I don't know the players anymore. When I turn on a University of Michigan basketball game, who used to be my team for Division One, I just don't know who these guys are anymore. And I think that's why I've kind of lost interest.
And like when I lived in Lincoln, Nebraska for 4 years, I became a Nebraska Cornhuskers football fan and have been for the 12, 13 years I've been out of Lincoln and here in Dallas. And like, so Nebraska's football season ended this year, and every good player is in the transfer portal, including their quarterback. Like everyone's gone. And now on Twitter, I see, oh, Nebraska just landed a long snapper, and they landed this. They're starting all over on their football team because everyone left. So, I mean, to me, Division One is just in really weird place. And Division Three, I interviewed the Illinois Wesleyan women's basketball seniors today. Martha Lippick, she's a senior. This is the first time she's been in the rotation. She's been grinding her freshman, sophomore, junior year. She's playing 12 minutes a game as a senior and playing a big role. That that doesn't happen at Division One right now. Someone being there 4 years and getting better and developing. And I think Division Three is unique and in a really good place.
Good basketball is good basketball, and it seems like we see more and more good basketball at the Division 3 level. So it's been great to see. All right, Bob, you're going to hang out with us as we move into the picks. But before we do, you mentioned your interview with the ladies there of the Illinois Wesleyan basketball team. Give us another, maybe some previews of what you got coming up. Plug your stuff. Tell people where they can
Yeah,
follow
just
along with you.
I appreciate that. I just today released an episode with all six of the IW women's basketball seniors. Really good episode where we got into like why Division Three is so special and stuff like that. So I think people will like that. And then tomorrow I'm talking to the pride of the Yeshiva Max, Zevi Samet. So I've been trying to nail this kid down ever since I left New York. But Zevi and I think are locked and loaded for tomorrow. And so that'll be a really fun one because that kid's pretty special in terms of what
Yeah.
he's doing on the court and maybe more importantly off the court. So
Yeah.
we'll talk to Zevi, and then I've got a few more that are just about ready to be locked and loaded. So we'll have a really like feverish pace here the next several weeks. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Yeah. So for everyone watching us here on YouTube, finish this episode and then find the QCast. Go make sure to hit the subscribe button over there and check out what Bob has going on. A lot of good stuff. That's really only going to ramp up as we get here towards conference tournament time, national tournament time. Going to be a fun stretch run. All right, Matt. Let's head into the picks.
Yeah, so quick review of last week, Zach. We had Scranton versus Elizabethtown. Scranton won that game by 12 points, so I won that pick. Next was Trine and Hope in another pick'em. Hope won that game by 2. Zach, you and I both missed that one. Somehow we both picked against Hope. That's kind of unusual for us. Eastern Connecticut at Keene State. That was also a pick'em. Keene State won that game by 7. You and I both got that one. Union played RPI in essentially a pick'em. Union won that game by 6, and I got the point. And then the game of the week was Wash U versus University of Chicago, and Bob's Maroons won that game big. And Zach, you got the point for that one. So last week's summary, Zach, you were 2-3. I was 3-2. Overall, you are 25, 23-2, and I am 35, 13-2. So you got a lot of ground to make up. Hopefully,
sure
this week will be a good one. But we have guest picker with us, so maybe at the start, Bob, you will make your pick, and then Zach will make his pick, and then I will make my pick. We'll go one by one. So our first game is Aurora, 2.5-point favorites on the road at Concordia. Is that correct, Zach? Are they 2.5-point favorites or 2.5-point underdogs? We should have fact checked this one before we started the episode. I'm just gonna. Feels like that one's
correct.
That is correct.
that's correct.
Would make sense.
Okay, Aurora's the favorites at Concordia, 2.5 points. So Bob, you want to make a pick here?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with Concordia taking the points at home. When you talk about the great bigs in Division Three, and you talk about the Jalen Overways and the Noah Clevelands, Logan Landers, 6'9" kid at Concordia, is one of the really underrated guys. We got to start kind of getting the name out there. The season he's having is ridiculous, and so I'm gonna go with Logan Landers having a monster game, and I'll take Concordia and those home points.
All right, Zachary.
Yes, I'm going to go the same way with the future CCIW Concordia University, Wisconsin. That's a team that Calvin matched up with there at the Wisconsin Dells. They were a pesky bunch. Getting 2.5 points at home here feels like an easy go.
Yeah, Zach, I probably tipped my hand questioning that line there. I thought maybe Concordia would have been favored by 2.5 at home. So if they're getting the points, then I'm going to go the same direction. All three of us like Concordia. So that's surely to mean that Aurora wins that game. Our next one is going to be in the landmark Catholic. This is essentially a pick'em, just a 0.5-point favorite on the road at Scranton. So, Bob, what do you think about Catholic Scranton?
Scranton has won a bunch of games in a row, 8 or 9 games in a row. They're playing very well. It's a 0.5-point line here.
Yeah.
You'd think that I would just go safe and take the home team. I'm going to say Catholic goes on the road here and plays really well. So I'm going to take Catholic in that one and
Okay.
give the 0.5.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Catholic as well. This feels like a kind of a measuring stick game for a Scranton program that really seems to be on the bounce back. So being home, maybe that'll be a good atmosphere, a real kind of prove it game for them. But maybe I'm not quite as ready to buy in just yet. I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna go with the steady Eddie known commodity there in the landmark with Catholic.
Yeah, so far this is going to be boring because I'm going to go with Catholic as well.
Uh,
I've been a Scranton believer all season long, but to me, Catholic is kind of more of the true top 25 team, at least in my mind. So we'll have to see. I'm sticking with them even on the road to win that game. So far, all three of us have picked Catholic in that one. Going out to the Liberty League for the next game, Vassar are 4.5-point underdogs at Union. Bob, what do you think about that one?
Union's on a roll. They also are on a big winning streak. I think they've won 3 road games in a row. The 4.5 scares me. I'm going to be honest with you. That scares me. But I am going to take Union. I'm going to take Union to cover that.
Okay, Zach.
And I'm going Union as well, and I'm possibly falling into the lose picking against a team one week and then follow it up by trying to make up for it by picking them the next week, which is what happened with me and Union last week. But give me Union here.
Okay, well, finally, we'll go a different direction because I'm gonna take Vassar in this one. I think this is gonna be a good game, 4.5-point line. But I think Vassar is sneaky good. I've liked Union all season long, but I think Vassar can keep this one close within a basket at least, if not win it outright. So I'll be different on this one and take Vassar. Kind of a fun one with some big names on this next game. Mary Hardin Baylor, 3.5-point underdogs on the road at Christopher Newport. Maybe two names that are bigger than there are good this year, but I think still two quality programs. So, Bob, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, 2 good program names right here. Christopher Newport seems to have things in a really good spot right now. I just brought them back into my ballot last week, and they'll stay there. For me, this is an easy pick. For me, I'm going to take Christopher Newport. That's a long trek over there to Newport News for my guys from Belton, Texas. And I'm going to think they're going to be missing the barbecue and everything like that. I don't think there's great barbecue in Newport News. I'm going to say Christopher Newport here they end up winning this game by 8, 9, 10 points.
Okay.
Yeah, you might have me second guessing because Christopher Newport is a program that always seems to be rounding out into form, kind of starting around this time of year. But I'm going to go with Mary Hardin Baylor. These are two teams that if you look at our efficiency ratings, are pretty close to each other, but kind of in opposite ways, right? Mary Hardin Baylor's got the really good offensive rating. Christopher Newport's got the really good defensive rating. So an interesting non-conference game and kind of a contrast in team shapes, as we like to talk about sometimes. But yeah, I feel like Mary Hardin Baylor's been a team that's really exceeded my expectations so far this year. So let's go with the pick here.
Yeah. Zach, I'm going to go with Christopher Newport. I'm going to agree with Bob here. I think the travel is a consideration when you have to go that far in Division III. You don't get the luxury travel in Division III. Also, I think Christopher Newport is a team that I have also picked back up into my top 25. I think they're playing better now than maybe they were a few weeks ago. So maybe the 3.5 line is going to be maybe not quite big enough. I still think I like this game 5 or 6 points, but one that I think Christopher Newport is going to win there. All right, then our D3 Datacast game of the week is a fun one in the Centennial Conference. Probably the two favorites there. Johns Hopkins, 2.5-point underdogs on the road at Franklin and Marshall. Bob, what do you think here?
This is a good one because there's 5 teams that are tied at 1-0 in the Centennial right now. So something's got to start giving. I think that Johns Hopkins has played a stronger schedule than Franklin and Marshall. The thing that's keeping F&M out of my ballot right now has really just been, who have they played? Who have they beaten? I want to see a little more. I think that Johns Hopkins here goes on the road and wins this game. So I'm going to take Johns Hopkins and those 2.5, and I think they're going to win the game on the road.
All right, Zach.
Yeah, I feel like Franklin and Marshall's been a team that I haven't given enough credit to over the last couple of years. So I'm going to start giving them credit here, picking them as 2.5-point home favorites. Give me F&M.
All right. I'm going to go with Johns Hopkins. I think this is a game, you don't want to say they have to win or a must win or anything like that, but I think this is a big one for them. They've been kind of yo-yoed in and out of my top 25. Franklin and Marshall's been kind of just on the outside the whole season long. I think a big game for both programs, but I think one that Johns Hopkins can win. I think the winner of this does cement themselves as the favorite, at least in the early going in the Centennial, but I'm going to pick Johns Hopkins there. All right, so that's the pick slate. Bob, we appreciate you joining us. We had a lot of fun.
It was a pleasure, guys. Great stuff you guys have been doing. It's the first thing I do. Actually, I watch these late Sunday nights because I am executive advantage gold platinum status with you guys. And so I watch these Sunday, and I would encourage everyone else to sign up on the Patreon to be able to do that too.
Well, and we appreciate your support. And also you can get some sleep tonight because you've been on this episode, so you
already know what we're talking about.
You already know what happened, so
you did most of the talking. So
there's a good chunk of the show I don't have to watch. I'm going to check out Matt's ballot. I'm going to watch your little banter at the beginning. I'm going to watch the mailbag, and then I don't have to watch this part.
Yeah.
Well, spoiler, no mailbag this week.
There's not much I did miss then.
Yeah. We'll go check out the QCast. We really enjoy your stuff, Bob. Thanks for being on.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
That's all for this week's show, but we can't leave without giving a word of thanks to our supporters through Patreon at patreon.com/D3 Datacast. These people have taken upon themselves to financially support us in what we do, putting on these shows, running D3Datacast.com, where we track NPI, where we have our efficiency ratings. All of that is set up for both men's and women's basketball. This week, we were able to improve the conference views so that you can go to any of those conference pages and see the same kind of information there summarized by conference for both men's and women's basketball.
Yeah, and you just heard from Bob, his little infomercial. He subscribes. If you want to join Bob in supporting the show, patreon.com/D3 Datacast. There's a $3 a month and a $5 a month tier. So pick out whichever one you would like. We just appreciate the support so much because we love talking about Division III basketball, and we love that there's a group of supporters that love D3 hoops just as much as we do. So thank you so much, Zach. Enjoyed this episode. Want to know what you guys think about these things we can say. Anything we said that was unfair, post it in the comments below. But for now, we're going to get out of here and say, good job, team.